everyone. Most of you know me. I'm Christine Jacobs. I'm the Executive Director of Represent PA. Welcome to the next in a series of things that we call the breakfast briefings. In fact, I also refer to these as our Connect the Dots sessions. And what do I mean by that? Well, there are a lot of issues that I'll talk about, and things like you may be reading about policing in Pennsylvania. You may know that this is an issue, but you may also not know both how it affects you, and if you don't like what's going on, what you can do about it. And so we like to connect the dots between issues you read about and what role the legislature plays and how we can work on it. Today in the call, we're going to be pleased to see Joanna McClinton is our chair of the Democratic Caucus in the legislature, and a wonderful supporter of Represent. She's she was a public defender, and so she knows of what she speaks in this area. We also are pleased to have Jenna Diaz. She's a first-time candidate. She's running for state senate from Lancaster County. And we also have Marlene Katz, and Marlene Katz is from Bucks County. And so you'll get different views of what's going on in some of these issues from different parts of the state and from different perspectives. Marlene has really worked hard for social change, and she wrote about it so eloquently in her application to Represent for support that we thought she'd be a good person for you to see today. So what is Represent PA? Just the quick brief. Everybody should know this. How many seats do we have to flip? We've got to flip 9 House seats and 4 Senate seats to be in the majority. We want to elect progressive women to make this happen in order to have a fairer representation. Most people don't know that 67% of the legislature, the combined House and Senate seats, are white men. We believe in reflective democracy at Represent, and so we think that the makeup of the legislature as a whole should look like all of us. And much as we like many of the white men in our lives, 67% is an awfully high percentage for them to have the authority that they do in the legislature. And the women are 26.9% right now. We want to enable dialogue in the legislature on issues of importance, and we want to make sure that all the different voices that we help to elect are going to be able to be heard in the legislature. And that only happens by electing a wide variety of candidates with a variety of different backgrounds, as well as putting Democrats in the majority. We keep track of a lot of issues at Represent, and this is where we get into my Connect the Dots. So what is going on in Pennsylvania, and what are the things you don't know about? The Pennsylvania legislature has been widely not understood, not tracked by most of our citizens, and so we've gotten into some bad positions. Our school funding is the most unequal between rich and poor school districts in the entire nation, and this is due to an overemphasis on local funding. We did a breakfast briefing on education funding a couple weeks ago, and you can find it on our website if you didn't see it, but it's a call to action for all of us. Some of the other things that we find unacceptable in Pennsylvania are maternal and infant mortality rates for Black Pennsylvanians is 3 times that of white Pennsylvanians. I don't know anybody who would think that that's fair, just, or the kind of society we want to live in. We also look at, recently the Pennsylvania grand jury report came out that looked at fracking and said that fracking is poorly regulated and affects the health of Pennsylvanians. And as with all other energy generation, the negative effects are felt most by the economically disadvantaged. Because if you're going to put up a power plant or drill a well, let's not put it in the neighborhood of somebody who's got a lot of money and is a current campaign donor. So these are just basic equity issues we have in our state, and it leads into our discussion about policing. What do we want to do? This is our path to reflective democracy. We want to flip the R seats to D seats with women. We want to hold on to the D seats we have, and we have a few women incumbents who are facing tough re-elects. And we want to put more women into D seats. We had at least 2 seats this year, maybe 3, where a Democratic man was retiring, and the candidate who's the Democrats have put into the general election is a woman. And yes, that was with our support. How do we accomplish this goal? We evaluate all the Democratic women running for the legislature for their progressive values. We read them all. We determine the flippability of a district. Some districts are 90% Republican and there may be wonderful candidates running there, but it's not a good investment for us. We want to raise money and invest it in good, winnable races. We have invested in all the races that the House Democratic Campaign Committee has viewed as flippable. They have 25 seats that they think are really flippable. Remember, we need 9. And there are 25 that they think are flippable in this election. 17 of those have endorsed candidates running in them. See why I say that we could flip the legislature with strong progressive women? And we influenced races early to support primary choices and to secure candidate viability. And so this is the background on who Represent is. If you want more, go to our website. But now I'd like to bring up our main speaker. There have been so many issues in the papers, the George Floyd murder really stressed the policing issue and what's going on in policing and a number of national issues. But so many of these things are state issues. And without worrying about what's going on in Congress, they can be affected by what happens in Harrisburg. And the person who's leading our Democratic caucus right now, and we thought would be a great speaker on this subject, is Joanna McClinton.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Chris, and good morning to everyone who's joining us. It is wonderful to be remotely in your presence. I don't have to put a mask on. It's a nice little break from the legislature where, of course, in our side of the aisle, we make sure that we have masks on and that we are following social distancing protocol, where who could think that public health could become so political? But these are the times we're living in, and thanks to the great work of Represent, we are looking towards not just an optimistic November, but an excellent November the 3rd, in which when we come back to the Capitol, both the Pennsylvania House and the Pennsylvania Senate will be all blue. And that is exciting. It's exciting because there are more than 900,000 registered Democrats in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania versus Republicans. So by the numbers alone, we should have already had both of the majorities in each chamber. But because of gerrymandering and because, of course, the fact that women are not always included in candidate recruitment, and of course, when someone's retiring. And before I get into what we're going to discuss this morning, just to share with you very briefly, I've been in the House for 5 years. I came after being a staff member in the Senate. I was their chief counsel, and I did not go to his office while working with the eye on having a seat in the legislature. In fact, when my predecessor was retiring, everybody said, "Hey, you live in the district, you're not interested?" I'm like, me? No, not at all, because when you are staff, you get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. You get to see the late nights on the floor. You get to see the things that people are not paying attention to back in the district. And you also get to see folks' frustration back home that, is real and authentic and, in fact, justified. And I thought, well, as a young lady, do I want to put myself into that type of predicament? And my immediate response was no. But fortunately, with a few more asks, I got out of my head and out of my own way and have been enjoying this work that I do for my community. And now, of course, being in leadership, doing work for our 93 and almost 102 or 10 or who knows. It sounds so great when Chris gives that overview, but hopefully for that many colleagues come back in November. And what's critically important, and the reason why I was able to see that there weren't a lot of folks who looked like me, is when I was interviewed for that job in the Senate, all I saw was older white men when I went on the floor. And I'm just like counting down for Janet Diaz to join the Senate and counting down for Michelle Knowles to come from Western Pennsylvania to join us in the House and all of the great candidates who are on this call. But now let's talk about the issue of the hour. So after being in our homes for 90 days, maybe a few more, we had to see a series of horrific murders from police to people that look like me. Whether we're thinking about Breonna Taylor, who was sleeping in her home like I was until 7:30 this morning, and sadly was, in wrong house executing a warrant, a no-knock search warrant, and was killed. That was horrible, and that occurred just a few months ago. Or whether we're thinking about the very infamous knee on the neck for 8 minutes and almost 9 minutes with George Floyd being killed in Minnesota. These things are just terrible. Unfortunately, they're not new, but with the age of social media, for the first time ever, we're having to see these things a lot more frequently than we ever did. You might read of something, you might hear about someone dying suspiciously in police custody, but we never had to be faced with it the way we did. And when you couple that on top of the pandemic, it's like younger people especially were energized and saying enough is enough. Let's take to the streets. Let's let our voices be heard. This is not fair. This is not fair that people who are from my community for 4 centuries, I've got a seat at my own dining room table, but we haven't had a seat at the table in this country for 4 centuries. And we built the table, we built the chairs, we put the lights up, we did all this work. But here we are still 400 years later, since 1619, that we are making an effort to simply have equal opportunity, to simply have our humanity recognized. And when you see police brutality and who often are the victims, it's people who come from communities of color, African Americans, Latinos. That's the ones that we're seeing these things happen to. And not to mention, just over the weekend in Allentown, another gentleman having a knee on the neck from police there. Thank God he did not die, he was not killed. But I mean, these types of gestures are happening over and over and over again. But thanks to the voices of the people across the entire Commonwealth, from where I am in Philly to the other part of my district in Delco, all the way to Erie, because of all those marches, all those protests, the first week that the legislature returned after the primary on June the 8th, my colleagues, very bold, very strong, very fierce, led a revolt in the Pennsylvania House. They say the revolution will not be televised. Speaker Terzai sure turned those cameras off. So the only feed is from people's cell phone footage. You can find a great one from Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. It was on his Twitter Live. You can find a good one from Representative Brian Sims. It was on his legislative Facebook. It was also on Representative Chris Rabb's Facebook, but it was not on PCN. It was not on the House legislative website. It was turned off. But my colleagues stormed the rostrum of the speaker shortly before session was supposed to start that Monday, and they held up a very large banner, like 10 by 10, that said what we've been saying everywhere, which is Black Lives Matter, and demanding that at the time, and we just got a new speaker, but of course we want a Democratic speaker, so this still isn't good enough, so don't get satisfied. But at the time, Speaker Terzai saying to him, one member after the next, this is not fair. We've given you police bills from 2 years ago that have never moved. Why haven't they moved, Speaker? Why haven't you called them up for a vote? Our constituents are upset, they're fed up, they're frustrated, and they are not seeing any progress happening. And my colleague, one after the next, after the next, after the next, gave excellent speeches and feedback. And this happened for 90 minutes. And when the Speaker made an attempt to come to his rostrum, our colleagues, led by Representative Summer Lee, who was the first African-American woman to come from the west side of the Susquehanna River. And of course, not alone, but with Representative Dan Miller, it was them spearheading this effort. They told the speaker, we know this is your job, you're supposed to start session, but today's not a regular day. We've seen one protest after next, and now we're staging one because you refuse to call up these bills. And he was just, flabbergasted, took a seat, just watched like everyone else. But let me tell you, after 90 minutes of listening to people pour out, some of them personal pain, the chair of our Black caucus, Representative Steve Kinsey, talking about how difficult it is to be pulled over on the turnpike going to work because you just don't have the faith that they're going to say, oh, you're a state rep, everything is fine, everything will work out. You don't know when something will turn deadly. And as a result of their bravery, we were able for the first time to not just get a meeting with the speaker, but to sit down at a table with, and not all like at a regular table, some of them by virtual meetings with the Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, with the Chiefs of Police Association, with the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association, and really come up with some protocol to move these bills. Now, you might say, well, why was it important that we do it here in Pennsylvania? We have not seen these types of incidents happen over and over and over again like we have in other states. And you may not have heard, or you might not remember, that unfortunately we had our own type of incident, and the young man would have just turned 18 this week. His name is Antoine Rose. He's from Pittsburgh. He was in a car with two other young Black men, all of them being unarmed. But unfortunately, when he came out of a car and took a step to run, he took his second step to run away, and less than 10 feet away, the officer put several bullets in his back, and he was killed. He was a rising junior. He was an honors student. He had a very promising future. And unfortunately, even though that officer had just been dismissed less than 60 days from the University of Pittsburgh for being aggressive and for being over policing, unfortunately, he found himself with the authority, with the badge and with the gun, to be able to do that horrible crime. And then fast forward to last year, was later acquitted. Pennsylvania's use of force clause allows there to be justification even if someone's unarmed. It's all about a subjective perspective from the officer, and there's no wiggle room. So when we came to the table, I want to just share with you some of the things that we had already proposed after Antoine Rose was killed, but also some new bills. These are the bills that we've been working on. One, outlawing the police chokehold, or using any pressure to restrict airways in detaining citizens. Two, requiring drug testing after police-involved shootings. Many times, if there is a car accident and the officers come to the scene, we as regular citizens have to take either drug tests or DUI and do other things to show that we are not impaired. But there is no similar standard to make sure that there's no drug abuse or other issues that they're human just like us, that they may be susceptible to. Another one, prohibiting language interfering with police misconduct investigations, disciplinary action, and discipline records from being included in police collective bargaining agreements. And this gets to what's called Act 111. Act 111, it oversees municipal officers all across the state. And this, it makes sure that whenever there's discipline, that they go through mandatory arbitration, and the decision of the arbiter is binding, meaning there can be no sort of appeal, no second bite at the apple. And unfortunately, this is in all of the contracts. The good thing about Act 111 is that there will never be any major strikes of police departments where they say, oh, we're all walking off the job. But the bad thing about the way it's currently written, and it's been in place for almost 50 years, is that there's a challenge for there to be discipline. And I know that we are from a variety of different jobs. My day job before ever being a legislator is an attorney. And we have a very large disciplinary board and a long list of things and grievances that people could say, hey, Joanna McClinton Esquire messed up here. I didn't get the outcome that she told me I'd get, or she didn't do any work. She took my money, and they could call up to Mechanicsburg. I'll end up on a list. There could be an investigation, and there will end up being an outcome, if not me losing my license, perhaps a suspension or some notation that puts me in the danger of one day losing my license. We don't see that similar discipline with police. So unfortunately, many times we see these incidents over and over and over again recurring. Where I live in Philadelphia, many officers have been fired only to get their jobs back with a huge amount of money for the pay that they've missed because of Act 111. But I'll move on because we do not have an infinite amount of time. Another bill we have is to improve access to police video footage, requiring all non-body cameras be subject to the right to know law. Another one is to create an oversight board to professionally certify, train, and provide continual education to police across the Commonwealth. Another one is to establish and require an independent review process where citizens or a special prosecutor are able to investigate where police kill or seriously injure citizens. Requiring law enforcement to be regularly evaluated for post-traumatic stress disorder. Creating a confidential database within the Attorney General's office to track officer complaints when they have been separated from another law enforcement agency. Require law enforcement officers to be mandated reporters of police misconduct. So another thing we've seen is in this culture of being empowered, of not being able to lose your job or discipline, is other officers who would be the ones that we call good officers, the ones we know, the ones we raise, our daughters, our sons. But because of this culture of, never being held accountable, they don't have to report what they see. And if they do, their lives, unfortunately, can be in danger from these bad apples that maybe come from a rotten tree who, are doing it for all the wrong reasons. So those are the ideas that we came up with. And now for the drum roll. On Tuesday morning, and I'm like, what day is it? It's Thursday. It wasn't yesterday. On Tuesday morning, Governor Wolf signed 2 of the bills that we initiated into law. Pennsylvania is now one of the first states to take real steps toward police reform in the wake of those deaths that I mentioned just 10 minutes ago. So what ones did we do? So there were 2 bills, House Bill 1841 and House Bill 1910. And those 2 bills were the ones that became Act 53. Now, what is significant about those bills? Do they cover all of the ideas I listed? No, they do not. We have a total of 19 different bills to work on policing, and I will put some links in the chat when we go on to the next speaker so you can read up on this on your own time. However, just to let you know, some of the good things that came out of the negotiations and that started only because of the protests on the floor of the House. Let's be clear, there would not be this conversation with this part of the conversation if there had not been a protest. We'd still be talking about bills sitting in a committee with no votes. So applause, applause, applause to my colleagues for just stepping up in a major way where many of us, like myself included, were still remotely working and not in the Capitol, but they came in large numbers and were able to do this and to be quite honest, show that our voices are significant as well. And because of that, the first one, House Bill 1841, which is now Act 53, it requires background checks prior to hiring officers, as well as the maintenance of a new confidential database that every police department across the state has access to. And if a police chief, now I'm the police chief, if I decide I don't want to check Christine Jacobs' record in this database, I have to put in the file why I did not do that. Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I check this database? Because this database, unlike any other, and it's for the first time that we've ever had such, will not allow officers to just hop around. The officer who killed Antoine Rose was one of those hoppers. And if something like this had been in place, perhaps he would not have gotten the job and been in that position to do such harm to a young child. Now, this is very significant because in Pennsylvania, there are over 2,000 police departments. Are you ready for it? 2,000. And when I say that, I mean we have 67 counties, and out of the 67 counties, we have almost 3,000 municipalities, meaning like in my district, Darby Borough, Yeadon Borough, those are municipalities. Yeadon Borough has about 12,000 people, Darby Borough has about 25,000 people, and they each have their own police department. And within even the city of Philadelphia, where I live, I'm under the Philly Police Department, but a couple blocks down, a mile down, there's Penn Police. there's Drexel Police. Where I teach at Temple Law School, there's Temple Police. So we have all these different departments that now will have access to and basically have to use this database to do some background, to do some inquiry, to see what happened when someone was dismissed. And this information will be maintained in the Attorney General's office. The next one, House Bill 1910, requires that officers be trained on racial, ethnic, and economic diversity, implicit bias, recognizing and reporting child abuse, and also making sure that there is more access to mental health evaluations. Now, I can't speak for where you work and what you do, but in certain places that you work, it is not encouraged that you get checked out. Maybe physically you have to, or maybe they don't care. Maybe mentally you have to, or maybe they don't care. But in the culture of law enforcement, because it is still predominantly male, I got some numbers for you. There are 4,255 state troopers. Only 5% are women. And the state troopers are overseeing a lot of rural counties that don't have their own municipal police departments. They are in several rural counties, 8 of them, where they are the only ones who are enforcing the law and responding. So that's also a very male-dominated industry. And because of that, there's not an encouragement to take care of yourself, to get treatment. And because many officers are seeing horrible things every day. They go to work. Some of us go to work, we have one bad day, and then we go home and it's over. But they're on the front line. You know, they have signed up to protect and serve, and that means honestly being put in a lot of danger. And what we want to make sure is that they do have access to screenings. So this second part of that bill makes it more accessible to get evaluations. And that is those are the 2 bills that are now law. And what I wanted to wrap up sharing is that that is just the beginning. That's just the beginning of the work. We still have a long ways to go. We are regularly holding meetings with our sisters and brothers in labor to talk about Act 111. Some of them who are not at all in law enforcement are very concerned, especially our teachers union, that this will be the beginning to the end of contracts. And why do they say that? Because even when I was working in the Senate, there has been a strong assault on the right to organize in Harrisburg. And it's been for several years now. That right to organize has been under attack. So while we want to do good in fixing the police contract, other women and men in labor, even in healthcare workers, they are concerned that this does not become a slippery slope. So we're meeting, we're talking, we're finding out what they recommend, what legislative ideas they can support, so that when we return to Harrisburg, and I just got back again yesterday, we shouldn't have any more session in July. We may come in August. We definitely have dates on the books for September. But when we return in September, we're holding Speaker Cutler to his word, and that is to continue to move these bills, to continue to move this legislation. And one thing that wasn't in the ceremonial signing, but I should note it as I wrap up and end, is that we also were able to get a bill through that says officers cannot, or no one can consent to having sex with an officer while in custody. That sounds crazy. But in Pennsylvania, it was not against the law. So that is important. The one thing we still have a bill, Chris Rabb and I have a bill, is to make sure it includes while an investigation is happening. Because many times as a public defender, and mostly the women that I represented, they would whisper to me during a trial for solicitation or prostitution as he's lying, I did it, and he didn't tell me he was an officer. And that is just horrible. It's dehumanizing, it's not fair, and unfortunately it's still legal in Pennsylvania. So we have much more work to do. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Joanna. We'll give you a few minutes to rest. We'll come back to you with questions, but thank you for the overview, and thank you for making it clear that there's some work done, but so much left to do, and a lot of that will come after you're in the majority. And I'd like to turn right now to Janet Diaz. Janet Diaz was supported by Represent in her primary in Lancaster County, and she's running for the state Senate. And Janet, tell us a little bit about policing in Lancaster and the major issues that you see in your county.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Christine, for the invitation. and hello to everyone that's out there. I can say that, first of all, I've spent like 18 years in a healthcare professional. I'm also a member of Lancaster City Council and an advocate for our community. And throughout my life, I have tried to be a voice to those without a voice. In regards to policing, Lancaster has done a tremendous amount of changes. As the chair of the Personnel Committee, I know that the impact decisions of hiring and the promotion of the community is very important. Lancaster City Police officers can live in jurisdictions probably like an hour away, where I feel that that is not good enough for me. I feel that police in general should be living in the community, so that they're basically letting us know who they are and making sure that they're accessible in the community. So, like, for example, I came from New York City. When I lived in New York, I knew a block away there was a police officer, and I knew that I can personally go over and talk to him, and I felt safe, and I felt comfortable telling him or reporting things that have occurred. You know, we should make a continual reporting and access to police in the community. I know when we have problems that have occurred, when I say the reality of access, this means we need to make that data easy and accessible and not hidden by maze of forms. I know that we hired a social service person that takes care of having anyone that has mental issues or maybe drug addictions that have been arrested. So that's a good thing that we moved into doing in Lancaster. We have training that was started for a de-escalation that continue to make sure that, you know, these issues in reference to incarcerating somebody forcefully to the point that they would kill someone is something that's very disconcerting, especially the people of color. As a woman of color, I live these issues as myself. I know what it feels like to be seen suspicious or followed through the store. As a citizenship question, I've been called wetback. It's very uncomfortable, and I want to make sure that if there is a stop at the stop sign, that I'm not going to be questioned whether I am a citizen or not, or to be incarcerated and found out that I am a United States citizen. I mean, these are things that constantly people of color can run into, or someone that is Hispanic as well. In Pennsylvania, officers who sexually assault a person in custody can use sexual consent by individual, as she was discussing. I know that Senator Katie Muth introduced Bill A51 that would protect a person's arrest or questioned by officers in the field from being sexually assaulted. I worked as a sexual assault counselor at the Y for over 6 years, and I will continue fighting for women to make sure that they're protected. But it's not only women. We also need to better protect men and children in our Commonwealth. It's a shame that we have gotten this. We have to talk about these things that have been basically brushed underneath, the rug. But it's good in a way that, there have been the Black Lives Matter protests that have occurred throughout the country. This shows that police reform is concerned for many Pennsylvanians. And, we need to eliminate also the fears that people have to leaving their homes or their children leaving their homes, because you don't know if they're going to come back alive, if they're going to be stopped by police, if they're going to be arrested for maybe something that's very minute, or maybe they're arrested for no reason. So we really need to make a change in the judicial system as well. I mean, we don't know what judge that person is going to run into as well.
Thank you very much. I think that's great. Thanks so much. And I want to also highlight, if you listen to what Janet was saying, she talks about changes they've been able to make at the Lancaster through the Lancaster City process and through her council membership. But these are things that are great leads. And also when she gets to be in the Senate next year, she'll be able to work with people like Katie Muth, as she referenced, and they'll be peers and they can talk about these things. And that's why Represent likes to support a wide variety of backgrounds in our candidates, because Janet brings a whole world of experiences that are parallel to what Joanna talked about, but they go towards the same effort. Joanna would also be the first Latina in our state Senate. So that's also a different perspective that she would bring to this organization. Thank you, Janet. And I want to bring on Marlene Katz. Marlene is another endorsed candidate. She's from Bucks County. And one might ask, why is policing an issue in Bucks County? It can be for both the citizens and what's going on, but it's also an issue for the voters. Marlene.
Thank you so much. I am so honored to be here, Christine, and also in the company of Representative McClinton and our great candidate, Janet Diaz, who I seem to run into quite often, and I feel like I have a connection with Janet. We both attended a Run to Win almost a year ago, and we were partners, and we had to discuss why we're running. So we spoke to one another, and we talked about why we're running, and I told her about my work in social injustice and trying to reduce gun violence in our communities. And it's funny because you really don't know people, you don't know their stories, and what I found out was Janet is a Latino woman married to a Jewish man. I'm a Jewish woman who has a Latina daughter from Guatemala. So opening up these kinds of conversations with people are so important because we don't know what we don't know, right? So I saw a lot of problems in Bucks County. In my neighborhood, you know, people think that Bucks County is a sleepy town and nothing happens, but there's a lot going on here. There is a rise in anti-Semitism. There's been Confederate flags that have been flown about. And prior to running as a candidate, I knew that I needed to get involved in social injustice issues. And so I went to the Peace Center and I attended some of their workshops on implicit bias and diversity and inclusion. And I learned enough to know that this is where my heart is and this is the change that I want to see. And I became a board member. And one of the things that I'm really proud that we're doing in Bucks County is we have this Martin Luther King Teen Injustice Summit that happens every year. And we talk about these very difficult issues that are really uncomfortable to discuss, but they need to be talked about. And not only do they need to be talked about, we need to reflect on our own lives and to find out where our own implicit biases are. And we have to look a little deeper. And as Representative McClinton said, our police officers are part of our society. They're our neighbors. And these things start at the kitchen table. So what we're doing in Bucks is we started at the Teen Injustice Summit where we invited in the police officers from the county to meet with students. We had hundreds of students come in, mainly students of color. And we watched a documentary called Walking While Black, Love is the Answer, which truly showed some of the injustice and the police brutality happening and targeting Black people. And these students and the police officers watched it together and then broke out into small sessions where they had one-on-one conversations. And you could see how emotional it was for both the officers and the students. The students talked to their fears, and the officers really had to listen. And there is something different between listening and actively listening. And they were actively listening to these students, and you could see the breakthrough that's happening. We are doing that across our county right now. So we're continuing to have these discussions. We're continuing to have this movie played. And our community is very active right now. There are people out there working with the NAACP. They're working to bring people together. We're having a lot of forums to keep opening these discussions. And I am so proud of our legislators for doing what they're doing, and I want them to know that I am going to be their partner. I will be there for them, and I will be working across the aisle to make sure that we have these changes. I want to see these small shifts occur in our families. I want to see the small shifts occur here, but we do need radical change, and I want to be a part of that change. I'm an interfaith minister. I work across, I'm a unifying voice, and I want to see these radical shifts because people are crying out right now. And they want the change right now. So it does need to be a radical change.
And thank you so much, Marlene. And it takes leadership. And aren't you proud that Joanna McClinton is part of the leadership and can lead that change for all of us?
I am so proud. I'm so proud. Joanna, I'm going to be your partner. I'll be with you all the way.
We have a few other women on the call right now who are running for office, and I just want to recognize them just briefly. Amanda Capoletti, we're so proud to have supported you in your Senate primary, and we're looking forward to you being part of the team that's going to make change in Harrisburg.
Thank you so much. I look forward to partnering with Represent as well as hopefully Janet Diaz and Representative McClinton and all of the good work that she's doing. It's amazing to follow and watch, and I look forward to being a voice for all of us out there and making the good change that we're talking about here today and every time you hold a breakfast briefing.
Thank you very much, Amanda.
Anne-Marie Mitchell.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to say hello. We do have a lot of work to do. Marlene, who's my neighbor in Bucks County by the neighboring district, and I have been talking about a number of these issues. It is extremely troubling when the chair of my township Democratic committee feels like she has to offer the ride to a young Black man walking through her neighborhood because she feels like he might not be safe. That is something we don't talk about enough in our area. I have heard way too many stories from my children in the public school system. It's not just anti-Semitism, it's blatant racism. Kids should not go to the prom and hear other children calling them the N-word. And, it's incumbent on us to speak up, and it's incumbent on us to, once we get into a position of authority, to work on making changes at a leadership position for people who are tolerating that kind of behavior in our schools and in our counties. And there's just no way around it. We've maybe been too lax in stepping up because we haven't had maybe the courage. And I think we're all feeling a little bit more emboldened and disgusted by what's happening. And I really appreciate the work that Representative McClinton's doing and everybody else, Representative Rabb. It's inspiring, and it reminds us that we have a lot more to do.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. And one of the things that she said and that you're hearing as a theme is these are candidates who are not running for office to be somebody. They're running for office to do something. And they know that they can't do it alone. So you're already hearing the teamwork between various candidates and elected, so that when they start in January, Joanna's got a good team out there running for her.
We're looking forward to having Claudette join us too.
She's on the call
Way
too.
to cue it up, Claudette. What's next? My next one.
Claudette Williams from Monroe County.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on. I totally understand what's going on here. As a police commissioner and the mom of a Black man and also a police officer, I understand the changes that are needed. And I can't wait to get to Harrisburg to help to move that needle forward. So once again, thank you, Represent, for your support. And definitely will be joining you, Joanne, come January.
That's great. Thank you, Claudette. Claudette is also, she's a retired sergeant major in the Army, and she's also, as she informed me last night, a nurse also. So this is a woman who has lots of learning in her past and is going to be a great addition on a number of fronts. Jill Denon.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for this. I always learn something new every single time I come on to one of these breakfasts and about these issues. I'm so thrilled that Joanna McClinton was able to be a force in getting some of this legislation passed. I think that we totally need this accountability. And when I originally decided to run, it was really because I'm on a school board and I see the inequity, terrible inequity in education funding. But since the Black Lives Matter movement, this has become more and more of a passion of mine. Very sadly, even with our first Black superintendent ever in Boyertown, we did not have 5 members of our school board who were willing to put out a strong equity statement. And it was a really painful time. I heard we have 2 African-American female teachers, and they reached out to me with how hurt they were. And I reached out to our superintendent, and board leadership. He felt strongly that board leadership should get everyone on board. And when board leadership reached out, he didn't have 5 votes, and it was sadly very political. And I've become more and more passionate about this issue. Boyertown, I don't know if people know, but Boyertown has been known, sadly, as a very racist community. 20 years ago, the KKK was marching in downtown Boyertown. And 15 years ago, when my son was in 6th grade, the parent of one of the students burned a cross on an African-American family that moved in. And as a result, Boyertown has become a no place for hate town. But once again, we are kind of the epicenter of some of these things. The one positive thing that we have seen in our community since we have hired a Black superintendent is he has gotten to know the community. And to Marlene's point, when you get to know someone as a person, things change. And the students and the young people in our community organized a silent protest after George Floyd.
That's great.
And I had several high school students say to me, I'm proud to be from Boyertown now.
Thank you, Jill. And one of the things that I hope you heard at the beginning of what Jill was saying was that she attends our breakfast briefings, not only so that we can see her and know that she's running and she's an endorsed candidate, but also she learns things. And I think that's important both for our donors and potential donors, but that's important for all the candidates to know what the issues are. And so if it's something, many of you are talking about personal reflections on what Joanna was saying, but there's also some of you who may be hearing these things and going, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. We got that a lot 2 weeks ago when we did our education meeting. I didn't know that. And what we're doing subtly here, not so subtly, is preparing these representative candidates so that when they are in office in January, they're more familiar with some of the issues. So thank you, Jill.
Lindsay Drew is next.
Lindsay Drew.
Hi, good morning. I am in Dauphin County, running for the 106th district. And like Jill, I also attend these because I learned so many new things and get to hear from so many incredible women. And this is really becoming something I look forward to on a regular basis. So thank you for doing this. I am a huge Representative McClinton fan and really admire the work and the tenacity and the bravery and strength that she brings to the caucus and the entire chamber. And I can't wait to get to Harrisburg and join her. Also, like Jill, I am a school board director and ran because I realized that the district that I went to high school in and my son was now going to be in was not addressing the inequities and the change of the demographics and that had occurred over time. And so I wanted to make sure that we were doing that. I've been so proud to be a part of a school board that we've flipped the majority. We have all Democratic women in leadership now. Wow. And we have been able to pass a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. We've instituted bias training and very intensive staff training, and also diversified and made our curriculum more inclusive to be representative of what our community, and world really truly does look like. So for me, this is something that's kind of in the fabric of who I am in wanting to affect that change. And I want to take that to a higher level because, we rise by lifting others and working together. So thank you so much for the support of Represent PA. It's been really, really phenomenal.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And again, I don't know if Represent has just been lucky in finding candidates who want to make change, or if this is in the DNA of the women out there in Pennsylvania. But did you hear what she said? It's Democratic women in the leadership who have worked on these equity issues and want to make change. And that's in our core, and that's what we want to see more of. So take it to the next level, Lindsay. Michelle Knoll.
Hi, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for Represent's support. And it was very informative to listen to Representative McClinton. We have a young group of people here in Quaker Valley who they have formed a group, a Facebook kind of group now, I assume eventually we'll meet in person, who are trying to hold the police locally accountable. And the local mayor sadly made a public statement saying that he had worked with them when he actually had not heard them. So they've put it out there and they're calling him out, which is, I think, a great thing for people to say, don't say that you've been working with us when you haven't. And in Pittsburgh here, I'm in Allegheny County, we're quite concerned. It was mentioned earlier about the maternal child health statistics for the Pittsburgh Black mothers in our community and Black infants. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that we're the worst almost in the country with those statistics. And I'm an early interventionist, so I'm very concerned about I'm very interested in working on those types of issues when I get to Harrisburg. And I want to thank Represent for your support and your interest. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. And one thing you should know about Michelle and Claudette Williams and Emily Skopov is their second time with Represent. And all three of them ran in 2018, ran wonderful races and didn't quite make it. And, but I love the fact that they knew that when they ran in 2020, that Represent would be money for them and that we'd be early on support for them. And this is the year. This is the year for big change. So I think we've gone through, Helen, I think most of the questions have been answered as part of the chat. I don't know if people have been watching this. You know, one question that I was curious about, Joanna, and that had to do with schools. And I didn't see whether you answered this one, but how do you feel about police department members being in the schools? Michelle Knowles shaking her head. But Joanna, is there any part of your legislation looking at that?
Not specifically. It's all on regular police department duties and policies thus far. But I do know that meeting with our younger constituents, they do not like the police presence in their schools. They prefer much more school resource officers, and even more than that, they would like to have more social workers to really interact and de-escalate situations, particularly children that go to school in cities or bigger schools, bigger high schools. They see the policing culture, the metal detectors as a preparation of the route to prison or the pipeline to prison, and they do not like it. They don't think that it makes them feel safe going through metal detectors, particularly when every student knows there's always a workaround to get in through another door if you really wanted to have a weapon on school grounds and property. So that is something that needs to change because it's a mindset shift to make our students know that they can be in schools without the presence of law enforcement, without the threat of being arrested, because unfortunately that's a situation as well. Many things that when I was a child, you know, will be worked out between parents. Now it's like automatic arrest, no matter how old, middle school, high school, and that is a horrible situation for our children.
And that is a mindset. And one of the other questions we had to do with the use of police in other situations, the use of police in issues where clearly somebody's having a psychotic or other mental breakdown, the use of police in, you know, disturbances around, you know, who parked a car where, that all often get escalated. And it seems to me, but does it go in the same category that has to be local discussions around how they use the police force as opposed to a legislative solution?
That would be more appropriate for local leaders, for council members. I saw Aaron Santamore, who runs Councilman Alan Dom, his office on here. That would be something that we could do at the local level, because even when people hear the phrase defund the police, it doesn't mean to pull the plug on police. It means to be able to reappropriate a portion of those funds for people who are skilled de-escalators, who are able to walk into tense situations, especially with folks who either have an intellectual disability or a mental health challenge. They do not need to have the threat of that type of force. And many times when sometimes you see videos of those things too. People just don't have the same capacity, but yet they're spoken to and dealt with as someone who has full capacity, and then it ends up in a very dangerous situation where someone is hurt. And if there was somebody who was a mental health professional, a social worker, they could be able to have a better outcome and ensure that their safety.
Thank you very much. I know there have been many other questions that have come up, and what I'd like you to do, there's been some responses. I know Joanna is a good multitasker, and she's been answering as many questions as she can in the chat. But if you don't feel like your question's been answered, send it to info@representpa.org, and we'll make sure that it gets to the right person, and we get to an answer as part of our follow-up to having attended today. I just want to sum up, and I want to thank so much both Joanna McClinton for all that you're doing for us, and also for your complete support of Represent. We're aligned and partnered with you. And I want to thank Janet Diaz for the hard work she's going through in trying to fight things in Lancaster. And I want to thank Marlene Katz. I knew you'd be the right person for me to invite to join this with your background. What can you do to be part of the movement? And I've described all the different ways Represent is part of things. First of all, we want you to invest money with Represent and therefore with our candidates. We're entering in our next phase of endorsements. And we have a process that we try to involve as many of our donors as we can in the endorsement process. And for the low price of $1,200, which, you can also be part of the endorsement process. So, if you want to let us know, send in the money, and you too can read candidate questionnaires and get to know how these candidates really feel about the issues that are important to you, and help us allocate our funds. We've allocated over $250,000 so far this cycle. We expect to have at least another 150 that we're going to be handing out in August, and we hope it to be more, and that comes with your help. Host a fundraiser, introduce us to your friends. I'll talk to any group you want. You've got a group of 3 people who want to chat, I'll chat. But introduce your friends and invite them to future breakfast briefings. July 31st, we're going to be talking about fracking. Everything you've wanted to know about fracking in 20 minutes. But it's going to be with Katie Bloom, who heads up Conservation PA. She'll be talking about what fracking has brought to us in terms of jobs and in terms of energy, but the horrible things that it's also done to our water. We talked earlier about the effect of what's happened with maternal mortality rates in Pennsylvania. A lot of that happens because of the places where we tend to dump our pollution, and it's caused more health problems in disadvantaged communities. And Katie Bloom will be joined by Senator Katie Muth, who has been leading the charge from the Senate point of view this week on trying not to give away more money to the fracking industry, which seemed to have been a goal of the Pennsylvania Senate. If you want to view some of our past presentations, are all on our website. And finally, I'm urging you to follow Represent PA and our electeds and our candidates on social media. Support them with likes, reposts, and comments. I know on the days that things are tough for somebody like Joanna, I'm sure she loves getting a right on Joanna note from people. It just kind of, see the smile? It just makes them feel better to know that they're supported by us. Do that for the candidates. We need to amplify our voices so that it's not just the naysayers who are out there on social media. How do you do it? Online. It's an easy way. There's also the place to send a check is on our website, but go out and support us. And again, thank you very much to all of the group of candidates who called in and let Joanna know that they're supporting her work. Thank you to our special guest today for being there and being willing to get up early and be with us today. And join us in a couple of weeks when we're talking about fracking in Pennsylvania. Thank you.